The last message I ever sent him is still on my phone. I have never deleted it. Sometimes I open it just to make sure it was real, that he was real. Did I do something wrong? It's been read. No reply. And the worst part isn't that he disappeared. It's that I still don't know who disappeared. Before anyone judges me, before you tell me I was stupid, before you say it wasn't real, before you type you can't fall in love with someone you've never met. I said the same things. I used to roll my eyes at stories like this. Until it happened to me. How it actually started, we didn't meet on a dating app. That's important. No profiles, no bios, no filtered photos trying to look interesting. It was a comment section under a random post. Someone wrote about feeling exhausted from pretending their life was fine. I replied with a joke. Something sarcastic, something safe. And he replied to me, I think most of us are just guessing and hoping no one notices. I don't know why that line stayed with me. Maybe because it felt honest. Maybe because it sounded like something I'd think, but never say out loud. I replied. He replied back. And somehow, a 5-minute exchange turned into hours. The conversations that pulled me and he didn't flirt. That should have been my first clue that this was different. Instead, he asked questions. Not the usual ones. Not, what do you do? Or, where are you from? He asked. What scares you when you're alone at night? When was the last time you felt like yourself? What part of your life do you never talk about? I found myself answering things I hadn't even admitted to friends. Because he listened. Really listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't minimize. He didn't try to fix me. He just stayed. How he became part of my day soon. He was the first person I thought of in the morning. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet thought. I wonder if he slept well. Sometimes I'd unlock my phone and see a message already there. Good luck today. I know you hate meetings. I never remembered telling him that, but I must have. He remembered everything. The way I hated mornings, the way I apologized too much, the way I tried to sound stronger than I felt. And somehow, being seen like that felt safer than being loved. The rules we never spoke about. We never exchanged last names. We never shared social media. We never video called. I asked once. He said, soon. I didn't push. Part of me was scared. Because once you see someone, things become real. And real things can leave. When I started caring too much, weeks passed. Then, months. We talked every day. Sometimes about deep things. Sometimes about nothing. He'd tell me about his work. I'd tell him about my frustrations. At night, lying in bed, phone glowing in the dark, I felt understood. And that scared me more than loneliness ever had. Because I knew I was crossing a line. I just didn't know when I crossed it. The first shift, it didn't happen all at once. It never does. One day his replies were slower. Still there, just delayed. Minutes became hours. Hours became sorry, long day. I told myself not to overthink it. I promised myself I wouldn't become needy. I wouldn't become anxious. I wouldn't imagine things. But I noticed. Because when someone becomes part of your routine, their absence is loud. The night everything changed, I had a bad day. Nothing dramatic. Just one of those days where everything feels heavier than it should, I told him. Not in detail. Just enough. He stayed with me, typing, responding. Being present. You don't have to explain, he wrote. I'm here. That was the moment, the exact moment. I realized I wasn't just talking to someone online. I was attached. And I didn't know how that had happened so quietly. The question I was afraid to ask, I waited weeks before I sent it. Typed it out. Typed, deleted it, typed it again. Finally, one night I pressed send. Do you ever think about what would happen if we met? The typing bubble appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. I stared at my screen. Heart pounding, waiting for words that would change everything. Nothing came. Silent, I went to sleep, telling myself he'd reply in the morning. He always did. But when I woke up, nothing. By afternoon, my stomach was in knots. By night, my chest hurt. I sent another message. "Hey, are you okay? Read." No reply. The disappearance days passed. No explanation, no goodbye, no argument. Just silence. I replayed every conversation, every joke, every message, every word, trying to find a moment where I ruined everything. But there was nothing, and that was the worst part. Because how do you grieve someone when you don't even know who they were? Where that left me, I still check my phone sometimes, even now, even though I know better. Not because I expect a message, but because part of me still hopes that maybe one day I'll finally understand what happened, or who he really was. 3 days after he disappeared, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything, the messages, the connection, the way he knew me. Then I opened our chat and realized something terrifying. He hadn't blocked me. The silence was intentional. I stared at his profile longer than I want to admit. Still there. Still active. That was worse than being blocked. Because blocking someone means anger. Or fear. Or finality. Silence meant choice. He was choosing not to answer me. The lies I told myself I made excuses for him. Maybe something happened. Maybe he was sick. Maybe he needed space. I hated myself for how easily I defended someone who had vanished from my life without a word. But when you care about someone, your brain becomes creative. Pain demands explanations. Looking for proof he was real, I did something I had promised myself I wouldn't do. I scrolled all the way back to the beginning. Every message, every late-night conversation, every tiny detail I had overlooked because I trusted him. And slowly, patterns started to appear. Things I had ignored. The things that didn't add up. He never mentioned friends, never sent photos, not even casual ones. His stories about work were vague, not lies, just unfinished. If I asked where he lived, he'd answer with a time zone. If I asked what he did exactly, he'd change the subject gently. At the time, it felt respectful. Now, it felt deliberate. The message that hurt the most I found a message from weeks ago. One I hadn't noticed then. "I like talking to you because here, I get to be myself." At the time, I thought it was romantic. Reading it now, it scared me, because it meant the version of him I loved might only exist here. When I finally reached out on the 4th day, I broke. I sent one last message, not angry, not dramatic, just honest. "If you don't want to talk anymore, I understand. I just need to know what happened." It was read, and for the first time since he disappeared, the typing bubble appeared. My heart stopped. The reply, "I didn't mean for this to happen." That was it. One sentence. No explanation. No apology. Just confusion wrapped in words. I waited. Another message came. "I never planned on hurting you." I stared at my screen, hands shaking. Planned. As if this had been a decision. As if there had been a moment where he knew how this would end. Asking the question I was afraid of, I typed slowly, carefully. "Then why did you disappear?" The reply took longer this time. Minutes felt like hours. Finally. Because this stopped being harmless. The truth, or part of it he told me he hadn't expected to care. That it was supposed to be casual. Anonymous, safe. I thought as long as I stayed faceless, no one would get hurt. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that staying faceless didn't make feelings disappear. It just made the fall harder. What he admitted next, "You don't know me the way you think you do." My chest tightened. I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer right away. Then I left things out. The partial confession he admitted he wasn't as free as he claimed, not single, not exactly unavailable either, just complicated. He wouldn't explain further. "I don't want to lie to you anymore, but I can't tell you everything." That was the moment I realized something important. He wasn't disappearing because he didn't care. He was disappearing because he cared too much. The question that changed everything I asked him directly. "Are you married?" There was no immediate response. No typing bubble, no read receipt, just silence. And somehow, That silence answered everything. When he finally answered an hour later, my phone vibrated. Yes, one word. That was all it took to shatter everything I had built in my head. The explanation I didn't want. He told me they weren't happy, that they lived like roommates, that he felt invisible, that talking to me reminded him who he used to be. I didn't interrupt, but inside, something broke. Because loneliness doesn't give you permission to borrow someone else's heart. The worst part, he said, I never meant for you to matter this much. I realized then that I hadn't just fallen for him. I had fallen into the middle of someone else's life, a place I was never supposed to be. Why he came back, I asked him why he replied at all. Why not disappear forever? His answer was quiet, because I couldn't live with the idea that you thought it was your fault. That hurt more than if he'd said nothing. The choice I didn't expect, he told me he would stop messaging me, that it was the right thing to do. That I deserved someone who could choose me openly. I should have agreed. I should have said goodbye. Instead, I asked the question that changed everything. If your life were different, would you choose me? His answer, he didn't answer right away. When he finally did, it was the most honest thing he'd ever said. That's the problem. I already did. Where that left us, we didn't say goodbye that night. We didn't say anything definitive. We just sat there, two people on opposite sides of a screen, knowing that whatever this was, it couldn't stay the same, and it couldn't end cleanly either. What I didn't know yet, I thought the worst truth was already out. I was wrong, because what he hadn't told me yet would make me question whether I had ever really known him at all. I thought knowing he was married was the worst thing he could tell me. I was wrong. Because the truth he finally confessed made me realize something far more painful. I hadn't just fallen in love with the wrong person. I had fallen in love with someone who never existed the way I thought he did. The night everything came out after his last message, I already chose you. I didn't reply right away. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood how dangerous this had become. We were no longer two lonely people talking online. We were standing at the edge of something that could ruin real lives, including mine. I asked him one last thing. If we're being honest now, who are you really? This time he didn't avoid it. The truth about his life, he told me, his name. His real one. Then his age, older than he'd hinted at. He told me he had children. Not grown ones, young ones. He told me his marriage wasn't just unhappy. It was fragile, held together by routine and silence. And then he said something that made my stomach drop. Talking to you made me feel like I escaped my life. Escaped. As if I were a place. Not a person. What I finally understood, I wasn't special because I was chosen. I was special because I was safe. No consequences, no responsibility, no collision with reality. I existed in a space where he could be honest, without changing anything. And that realization hurt more than the betrayal. The question I needed answered. I asked him, if I asked you to leave, would you? The silence this time was longer than ever. When he replied, the honesty was brutal. No excuses, no poetry, no confusion, just truth. Why, that answer changed everything. That one word told me everything I needed to know. He loved the version of himself he was with me, but not enough to become that person in real life. And I realized something equally painful. I had been falling in love with potential. With words. With late-night conversations. Not with actions. The moment I took my power back for the first time since this started, I didn't feel desperate. I felt clear. I told him, then this ends here. He protested. Said we could keep talking. Said we didn't have to label it. Said he didn't want to lose me. But I finally understood that staying would mean slowly erasing myself. So I said goodbye, properly. Letting him go, I didn't block him right away. I sat with the chat open, staring at years' worth of words. I wanted to remember what it felt like, not the pain, but the connection, because even if it was flawed, it was real to me. Then I closed the app. And this time, I didn't reopen it. The days after, I expected devastation. Instead, I felt something quieter, grief, but also relief. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't checking my phone, I wasn't living in between messages. For the first time in months, my life felt like mine again. What this experience taught me, I learned that intimacy doesn't require proximity, but love requires courage. I learned that someone can understand you deeply and still be unable to choose you. And I learned that attention isn't the same as commitment. The message he sent months later, I hadn't heard from him in a long time. Then one evening, months later, a notification appeared. A new message. From him. I didn't open it right away. When I finally did, it was short. I hope you found someone who can love you out loud. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Where I am now, I don't regret meeting him. But I no longer romanticize what we had, because love that has to hide eventually makes you feel invisible. And I promised myself I would never shrink for someone again. The final truth, I didn't lose him when he stopped replying. I lost him when I realized I deserved more than someone's escape. And gaining myself back, that was worth everything.